AI like children. So they were adopted into families, they were treated as kids, they grew up with the human kids, and they identified themselves as humans.
Well, that's interesting. But I want to see if either of these two want to venture an answer, and then I will get to you.
And you.
And you, yeah. Okay.
I'm really fond of the Star Trek historical documents that refer to the Doctor in Voyager, and you got to see that the other AIs that have been, or the other holograms that have been built that had his same personality ended up being used in mining colonies. So they were just, effectively slave labor, and so that was interesting to me. I also would say that the whole series was very progressive in terms of human rights, and so of course they decided that Data and the Doctor should have rights. But we can see very clearly right now, especially in certain southern states, that extending human rights to humans is something that people have a lot of trouble with, and so I do think it's going to be a really big problem. I also know a lot of sci-fi is based on we're afraid of these things. Any kind of artificial intelligence is potentially an enormous threat because it ought to be able to think faster and more reliably than humans if it's intelligent AI. I had a thought earlier, is AI necessarily very intelligent? And I guess that's hardware as well as software.
It's artificial stupidity.
Yeah, I mean,
make mistakes faster and more accurately than
yeah, you could probably limit it, but the notion of raising it with children is certainly an interesting, probably smart idea.
I wish I could remember the name of the story and the author, because
one of the really big issues is the physical strength of the robot, assuming that we're talking about a robot. But what do you have to add?
It's kind of going off about what you were saying about even just kind of giving basic rights to humans, depending on where you are. I think that we define a human being as, or somebody who is special, as having a soul. And so if we continue as a society to say that if you have a soul, therefore you're protected, just like, we talk about, a lot of things that happen with animals and all, there's animal rights and all, but a lot of people say, well, animals don't have a soul, so it's okay if we do whatever we want to them. So I think that if we get past and look at artificial intelligence as something that is an extension of us as human beings, like maybe if we ever get to the point of even downloading our own consciousness into a machine, does that therefore become us? Is our consciousness our soul? So there's a lot of, I think, even more than just science here, there's a lot of philosophical questions that need to be answered. So I think it just really depends on where we go in the next several hundred years. If this is going to be gradual change.
In other words, when lawyers do everything, when robots do everything, we'll all be lawyers.
Yes, well, and trust me to come with a legalistic question. So, okay, let's say that we give AIs, voting rights. Okay, there's an AI. We get a fork on the AI. Do both versions of the AI have voting rights? If I produce 500 forks off of a single AI, are there 500 votes that I can roll into a mass meeting now? And you do realize that you and I are probably the only two who understand the significance of the term mass meeting. Yeah, or hijack a delegated convention. Things like that do come to mind. What is the unit of AI that gets to vote? Do these 500 AIs have to come together, come to a consensus to vote?
I wasn't even thinking of anything that intelligent. I was thinking of just creating a sort of a half-sentient bot that would swarm news sites and be like an evolving algorithm that would try to convince people to vote for or against.
It's called a troll.
we automated.
We have plenty of human ones of those.
So don't forget the gentleman in the back.
No, of course not. Go ahead, sir.
When you guys brought up self-preservation for robots, that already occurs right now. I listened to a podcast, I think it was Star Talk, a couple of years ago with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he had these people on, and the guy said they made these little spider robots that they were practicing for going to Mars to just do basic things, like build a design out of blocks. And they, for some reason, they managed to problem solve. When there's a gap in something, they figure out how to build a bridge. to get over it, to achieve their goal, even though they were never taught how to build a bridge. And the second thing, with self-preservation, they refuse to put themselves in harm's way, and they shut down. So this is something that's actually happened in a lab. It's not hypothetical. So something that only has, you know, however many bits of memory in it, that's only programmed to do 3 things, it knows not to hurt itself.
Well, yeah, and the question then becomes: is it doing that because it's set? It looks because its first thought, because its thought is, I don't want to extinguish myself, or is its thought, wait a minute, if I go in there, I extinguish myself, and I can no longer do these 3 things. These functions are more important than whatever the heck that thing is that's going to extinguish me. So I will rather shut down so I can continue to do those 3 things in the future.
And the guy who programmed it doesn't know the answer.
The interesting thought is not so much that by shutting down, they're showing interest in self-preservation. It's when you get to the point where you've got colonies of these machines working together, and some of them will sacrifice themselves in order for the rest of them to accomplish whatever task they're going for. That's the point that we should all be worried.
He was first. Sorry, go ahead.
One thing that seems to be odd is that people seem to think that programs are deterministic, you know? I mean, but most, like, modern research in machine learning is highly probabilistic, you know? So you're doing things in, like, most of the big research right now is like recurrent neural networks. You get these like just giant neural nets. It's just, there's no like really deterministic way of getting through that. We put them together, we sort of like throw things at them, and then they learn how to do stuff. So I mean, you can't come out of, you know, AI and think this is a well understood system. This is a highly chaotic system that's
so essentially so even the programmers are winging it at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
well, it's
how reassuring.
To try to create a true AI, you don't program it, because if you program it, it's, like you said, deterministic. You build a heuristic learning system and give it opportunities to learn.
We also don't really understand the human brain super well at this point. We can't, you know, a lot of the drugs that work for psychological problems, for example, are like, oh, hey, guess what this one does? Rather than, you know, let's build it this way to make it do that. We still just, there's so much we don't understand, which actually makes it a little bit more scary.
Now the interesting part is, you know, throwing problems at this heuristic learning system, you realize that you've got an AI when you give it another problem and it looks up at you and says, what is your deal? Because that's when it realizes the world is larger than the problem set in front of it.
Do you want to add something before I?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go
Okay. Do you have a question?
I guess my question goes back less from the robot end and more towards the human end of things.
Okay.
We're already seeing a lot of industries cut thousands, if not millions of jobs because of automation and robotics replacing what we used to do. Like you said, the self-driving car coming along, that's probably going to eliminate trucking, a bunch of industries tied in with that. Where do we go in the case where we've eliminated millions of jobs and there aren't any outlet for all these people that are now out of a career?
I will start with that. As I had mentioned earlier, the first thought when I saw this panel was, if you had gone to a typical monastery in 1342 and told them, oh, in a couple of 100 years there's going to be a machine that is going to do all of that book writing for you, the response would be, what are we going to do then? You know, one of the first things I teach, I tell my students in my economics class, is economic. They call it the dismal science, because we have limited resources and unlimited wants, and the unlimited wants part doesn't go away. If we have labor-saving devices that say, finally break the Teamsters Union, then we will end up saying, oh, if we don't have to expend labor driving, we can expend labor doing something else, and we'll figure out what that something else is. Now, we here in 2016 probably can't think of what our great-grandchildren would want and would expect as normal as part of their lives in 2100. Because I guarantee you, our grandparents probably never saw one of these coming. My parents didn't. for a while.
And your grandkids will think it's really pathetic in a few years.
Oh, yeah.